Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is one of the finest comics critics in the game. Joining me for our annual Superhero State of the Union, it's Oliver Sava. Thanks for coming on, Oliver.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
We're recording this on a Wednesday. Happy New Comic Book Day. How was your day?
It was great. I got a ton of comics. Lots and lots of comics this week.
What'd you get? You don't have to run down the whole list.
I mean, I was very excited for Dark X-Men. I've known Steve Fox for many years, and I love the insane lineup for that book. And it was really fun first issue. I really liked Dark Web, so I don't know if I'm in like the super minority there, but I'm a sucker for Maddie Pryor, and it was a really fun book.
What is the team on Dark X-Men, like the roster?
The roster, it is Maddie Pryor, Havoc, Azazel, Nightcrawler's dad, Maggot, Empath, who else? Gambit, Gimmick, who was in that Children of the Atom book. And I think that's the main core of it. I'm always stoked to see Maggot. Just such a stupid character, but I got into X-Men comics with the first movie. So like Maggot stuff was fairly recent. It had been like the last 5 years. So those were kind of like the graphic novels that I could find at Borders and stuff. And so, you know, I have a soft spot for Cecilia Reyes and Marrow and Maggot. And I think that's like the Steven Seagal lineup.
It's actually a pretty fun run. Or at least from what I remember when I was reading it when I don't even know how old, when that comic was coming out. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Not to the degree my friend Brandon, who absolutely loves Maggot, does, but I remember that being pretty fun. And that was Carlos Pacheco art during that run too, right? Wasn't it?
Yes. And I believe there was some Salvador Larroca in there too. But that was the time when Larroca was very much a kind of Pacheco clone.
The stuff that's been going on with the Fall of X has been really interesting because there's been some, let's just say, some swings. Like the Children of the Vault getting a book is not something I ever would have imagined, and yet here it is. And people seem to really like it. So there you go.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. Did you read 20th Century Men?
No, I didn't. I am going to get the trade paperback at some point just so I can read it for my end of the year list stuff. But I did not pre-order it. My shop did not get any copies. So I owe myself a trip to a bookstore to buy it.
Yeah, very much a superhero book. Like a kind of very postmodern deconstructionist kind of deal, but it was definitely a superhero book, and it very much established camp as somebody to keep an eye out for.
And that's what we're here to talk about. We're actually here to talk about the annual Superhero State of the Union, which can include non-Marvel and DC stuff, but will probably primarily include Marvel DC stuff because they are the primary producers of that stuff. And we're here to talk about what's going on with all that and our feelings about all of the things that are going on. I wanted to start with a 10,000 foot view. Last year, we were kind of shockingly positive about things overall. Not that we shouldn't be. Ideally, we are positive. That would be the best. I'm curious as to what's your take on where things are now overall.
I am feeling much more energized and excited by DC right now, just in terms of new talent, just like new books, taking swings on characters that don't necessarily expect to get their own books. They've really leaned into like miniseries in a way that I appreciate. It just gives you a lot of variety. Black Label is exceptional, like just really good books. I mean, I have a problem with everything being Batman for the most part. It is Batman comics, but I mean, it is what it is. Batman sells. So, and they're giving me enough other stuff with other characters that I'm okay that there's 1 billion Batman books. And, you know, they're giving us Christian Ward's Batman. Like, that's going to be really, really cool. And it's going to be really big. And I just love the format of those books. They just kind of, they give me that prestige format vibe that I got when I was buying, you know, Avengers versus JLA as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. I like that there's that bumped up production and just incredible talent on those books. DC's thinking a little bit more forward, and Marvel's going very backward and very just going back to the well with a lot of just, I mean, they're doing miniseries too, but there are all these miniseries that like are creators from 25 years ago telling stories set back then. They just kind of feel superfluous.
I was going to bring that up because when you brought up the fact that DC is doing a lot of miniseries, my initial take was just like, I do feel a little. Miniseries to me feel like they stand out more when they aren't constant, when they're not everything, basically. But DC has done a very good job of making the minis that they're doing feel like they should exist, or like there's a reason for them to exist, versus where a lot of Marvel's ones feel like they exist just so they can have more comics coming out, and like so they can have different audiences being served at the same time. And sure, like I understand the idea of wanting to create different kind of programming, if you will, but at the same time it's interesting how different the approach feels. In a lot of ways, they're both producing a lot of minis. They're both having kind of like random interstitial events going on. They have all these things that are very similar. And yet the way that DC is doing it just seems like it's more built on quality. And so I like it more.
Yeah, basically.
I don't know why that is. Like, I don't know what it is about the difference in approach that feels so different to me. But DC stuff, it's like, here's a good example. So my favorite Black Label book right now, and probably on my short list of like favorite Black Label books, period, is Peacemaker Tries Hard.
Yep.
I absolutely love it. Kyle Starks, Steve Pugh, Jordy Belair, Becca Carey. It's, I think, like either a 6 or 7 issue miniseries. And it's really set on telling this story that really helps us understand Peacemaker, and also kind of has the vibe of Peacemaker from like the James Gunn stuff, but still feels very much like it has to be a comic. And I don't really feel like I get that from a lot of the Marvel minis. And it's interesting how even just that one idea can be this massive divide between the two right now. But that really feels like it is. Does it feel like that to you too?
Absolutely. I just feel like I'm seeing more new names on DC books versus like a lot of older creators. And I mean, it's nice that they're like working, but like I'd rather have, like, I'm excited for Louise Simonson doing a Jean Grey book because it's like part of the whole Fall of X thing. It's like she's back working on this character that she has a long history with, but like doing something that is still like relevant. But at the same time, I also don't want to be like slave to continuity and like it has to be part of the bigger story for it to matter. But a lot of these books, it's just like, who, I don't know who wants like Warlock Rebirth or whatever. Like, and look at the numbers, they don't sell super well. Like Ghost Rider, Danny Ketch or whatever, I think the first issue was in top 50 and then it drops pretty fast.
I mean, that's the tricky thing though right now is like sales charts are completely broken. There's like really no
Yeah.
point in even looking at them. But so when you say DC has the exciting new talent, like what are you referring to there? Are you talking about creators migrating to DC? Or are you talking about Kyle Starks, for example? Like Kyle Starks is doing something at Marvel and DC, but Peacemaker Tries Hard is his, I believe, his first DC work. And like, is that more who you mean? Or do you mean like just like Jason Aaron and like Kelly Thompson coming over and doing stuff?
Not necessarily. Just like we have, like on Hawkgirl, that's Jadzia Axelrod, who worked on. Oh my god! Why can't I remember the graphic novel that character was from?
Oh God, it's called like
Galaxy.
Galaxy. That's it.
I like that DC took a chance and gave the opportunity for an ongoing book. Or actually, I think that's a miniseries. The new Cyborg book, that's a new writer, Morgan Hampton, who came out, I think, of like the Milestone initiative that they had and kind of really fostering some new talent. And there's some new artist talent too that came out of there too. The artist who did the Night Terrors Poison Ivy book and did a couple issues of Poison Ivy when Marcio Takara needed a few issues break. Adagun Ilan, yeah, solid artist. Yeah. Oh, the like We Are Legends books, which are kind of all over the place, but like I think the Vigil's really cool, and I'm not really that surprised that Rom V gave us a cool book. The first issue, fine. Second issue, I was like, oh, okay. Third issue, Sid Kotian, who's done a couple Marvel books, like on that Storm miniseries right now that Anna Chenti's writing, did kind of some really killer work on the third issue of the Vigil. And that just like a cool espionage book that's all brand new characters as far as I know too. Spirit World is like a really gorgeous book that kind of has some like webtoon vibes, honestly. And like I don't think that's a bad idea.
I mean, it's like what you said earlier. It seems like they are trying to find new audiences in different ways that they can. I mean, even Black Label itself is like that. Like Black Label is meant to provide an environment for kind of like evergreen sellers. And I think they're doing a pretty good job of it. I mean, I've brought this up on the podcast a number of times, but even if you just look at Wonder Woman, like you look at Historia and you look at Dead Earth, that provides two distinctly unique flavors of Wonder Woman stories from the same line, from wildly different creators that anyone can pick up and read and pretty much not be. I mean, I don't see why anybody would be confused by it, like from a continuity standpoint. And that is something that's really important because if you want to try to bring in new readers, you have to make things accessible. And a lot of the stuff that DC has been doing has been successful at that. Like, I think even to some degree, Dawn of DC has been. Like, I think Dawn of DC, I've heard a lot of really positive things from retailers about Dawn of DC. And I'll admit, it actually convinced me to pick up some new comics that I wouldn't have otherwise. Like, how has Dawn of DC as an initiative worked for you?
Really well. I find the whole night terrors thing, interrupting it like 3 months in, very puzzling. I have no idea why they did that. No idea why they didn't just keep the numbering of the books. But it's also weird to have like 2 issues and then a fill-in. Like, just real weird. I wish that they didn't cut the momentum off like that. But otherwise, like, pretty strong. I think Superman is really good. I'm not the big like Joshua Williamson is really kind of hit or miss for me and is really a driving force at DC at the moment. But I think he's one of those writers where whoever his artist is can make a really big difference. And Jamal Campbell, absolutely sick, amazing artist. Just every single issue that he does is incredible. And then Nick Dragotta, like, yeah, sign me up. Like, if these are my two artists that I have at the moment, and then Tom Riley doing the Night Terrors books for that, like, that's just insanely gorgeous. Such a good art team. And those are three creators that have very different styles too. I guess Tom Riley and Nick Dragotta there's a little bit more similarity there.
A little bit.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit just more like, it's not as digital, shiny, and not in a bad way. Like, it's like the good kind of shiny, a good Superman type of shiny too. Yeah, just, that's a cool book. Trying to think about what are all the other. Oh, I think that Harley is really good right now.
Really?
Teeny Howard and Sweeney Boo. Sweeney, that art is awesome. Really, really, really beautiful artwork on that book and awesome backups. The backups are like Erica Henderson. Who else? Adam Warren had an insane one. They're just really fun little backup stories, and it's a cool book. It's very, very silly. It's got some multiverse stuff in it, so be ready for that. But they're making it work.
You actually had me snap upwards when I heard Erica Henderson. I had no idea she did that. I mean, I think that, like what you just described, I haven't read Harley Quinn, but what you just described, though, fits kind of what we're talking about, where putting like Adam Warren on that book or Erica Henderson on that book or even just Sweeney Boo, those are really smart and fitting castings for something that is related to Harley Quinn. And also it's like exciting and new and different. And if you're going to read an Adam Warren comic, you're going to be like, you're going to walk away having felt something one way or another. And I think that that's a really big thing that they're doing right now is like they're being very smart and very deliberate about their castings, and they're really delivering on it. I have to admit, though, it's like I'm with you on Night Terrors. I went from being really excited about Dawn of DC to I have read 0 Night Terrors. 0.
You don't have to. You really don't have to. If they feel like they are totally extraneous, I don't know if they're essential, but I would say read like Night Terror Superman because Todd Riley's art is incredible. And Wonder Woman was Josie Campbell, who did just a really good Mary Marvel book and is one of the producers on My Adventures with Superman, a show that I absolutely love, writing for Juan Ferreira on art on that book. And it's really gorgeous, but it's also like, for this, like the plot is really kind of, it's your nightmares are, I feel like we've had this kind of event already in the past where it's like all of your fears. It has a lot of like metal vibes too, where it's just like the dark versions of these characters. I don't know. It's not very exciting.
It was really interesting how Dawn of DC was like very fundamental. It wasn't like rebirth levels of this, but it was definitely built on like hope. It had this like new hopeful sheen to it, down to like the fact that it was like fronted by Titans getting the headline spot, which I do have to say, I like that Titans book, but its schedule slipping so much has kind of made me kind of forget about it to some degree.
Well, I don't think the schedule has slipped. It just had 2 issues and then Night Terrors happened.
Oh, is
There's
that
a
it?
couple books. Yeah, Green Lantern, 2 issues and then Night Terrors happened. Like, it's this thing that cuts the books off right when they're getting started.
Oh my
Like,
God.
I don't think that Titans is late in any way. It's just that they jumped right into Night Terrors.
That's funny. And this is a good example as to why Night Terrors is kind of weird, because in my mind, I was thinking, because it came out the same week as the Avengers #1 from Jed MacKay and CFVIA. And that one is on 5. And by the time #3 comes out, Avengers will be on 6. And it's just kind of interesting to me. I hadn't even put that together. I was just like, where is Titans? It just feels super late. And logically, I should have immediately realized it was Night Terrors. But because I'm not reading Night Terrors, it's just like DC has created this chasm in my brain, basically.
Oh, and I really dug the Black Beetle book, or Blue Beetle. Just fun story, really cool artwork, an artist that I'm very excited to see more from.
Is this a Blue Beetle Night Terrors?
No, there's going to be a new Blue Beetle, but the Blue Beetle Graduation Day miniseries I thought was really fun.
Mm.
It definitely tapped into that old school Blue Beetle vibe. Art has a very like manga-y energy at times. That artist is Adrian Gutierrez, and well, so this new Blue Beetle book is tying into Seven Soldiers.
What?
The final scene of the Blue Beetle miniseries was gimmicks or whatever. The woman who was like responsible for like getting a group together, I think, in the first issue of Seven Soldiers, and she's like, the bad guys that were like very scaraby bad guys, I think that they're gonna come back, and like, so I think that there's gonna be weird Seven Soldiers connections in Blue Beetle. I'm into it. I'm very into it.
That's super wild. I would not have expected that for a Blue Beetle book. So I want to run something by you related to events and actually that Titans book. I was talking with somebody at DC who described Titans Beast World, that upcoming Tom Taylor and Ivan Rice book that was announced at San Diego. They described it as an event, and I was like completely blown away by that. When I saw it was announced, I thought it was just like a kind of spin-off book to kind of explain a little bit what's going on with Beast Boy.
Yeah.
Apparently it is viewed as an event comic.
Mm-hmm.
Did you perceive that as an event when it was announced?
Yes, just because I read the press release. So it was like one of their like early embargoed things that was like, we have this big event coming, but I was also like, Beast World, okay, like we need a little, especially when you have these big initiatives that you're starting up a bunch of new books. Like, this is the perfect time to give a book 6 months without an event.
Yeah.
Like, let the creative team do what the hell they need to do to like build up an audience and get people interested. Because otherwise you end up with people not knowing when the next issue of Titans is coming out.
Meaning me, a person who should know better. But this ties into something I think is interesting about where DC and Marvel are where it comes to events. I'm not going to say I have event fatigue, or like you and I both have event fatigue, or anyone does. But I think about that Beast World thing, and then also like that Gang War announcement, and they called it a crossover event for Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if being an event means the same as it used to for either publisher. It just seems like they just kind of are arbitrarily calling books events when they aren't necessarily events. Do you feel like the word event means the same as it used to?
I mean, it sounds like Gang War is like a line wide event versus, and like Fall of X is a line wide event versus like Judgment Day, which was a kind of capital E event, the way that we think of them, really, where it touches everything. And I think Judgment Day was probably one of our best events of the decade,
It was
like the
really
last
good.
10 years. It's very, very, very good. Like Kieran Gillen plotted the hell out of that. And a good, interesting concept that actually not that far off from Night Terrors in terms of like each character kind of confronting something about
Mm.
like when they're being judged, and but in a way that felt very organic in those books, and just made a very splintered Marvel line come together. And that's what these books should do. And Night Terrors, it feels still very splintered. Every book has its own little Night Terrors thing, and then there's this main story that I'm just not interested in. It's like, let's defeat the nightmare villain. Okay. And then they will. And then it's done. Like, it's just not exciting.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Summer is in full swing and things are getting hot on Zoop. August is the time for mini launches, including, ironically enough, the book called August by Benjamin Morse, also an anthology from Stack Deck Press, Tony Gregori's Pork Chop Robot Killer, and the end of Glenn Bray's scrapbook campaign. And around the corner in September is Howard Chaykin's first foray into crowdfunding. There's so much more on the horizon, so stay tuned for updates. It takes less than 30 seconds to sign up for Zoop, and the e-commerce style checkout is easy and intuitive. Add multiple rewards and add-ons into your cart, provide some info during checkout, and you're done. No confusing additional steps in finalizing your pledge, and no post-campaign surveys. And of course, the creators appreciate your support. For creators looking to crowdfund your project, Zoop is currently open for submissions. Email them at hello@wearezoop.com to start a campaign. And now, back to the show. It is just interesting with like the Beast World thing where, I mean, you described it as, or like with Gang War actually, like when you described it as a line wide, I mean, it's not, it's just like 2 Spider-Man books and like a few miniseries that like connect to it. In like, there's a Daredevil miniseries that's going to be happening separately from the Daredevil main series during it. And I don't know, it's just kind of interesting where if they just called it a crossover, maybe it's just more of a marketing thing for me. If they just called it a crossover, I'd be like, okay, yeah, sure. Like that's fairly standard. But like trying to describe it as an event, I'm like, this doesn't feel like an event to me. And it's kind of devaluing the word to me to some degree.
Yeah. I mean, I do not think that Titans has stepped up to Justice League level, frankly. I do not think that like, again, the book only having 2 issues come out is a bummer. But like, I don't know if they really established the team in the way that they need to make it really feel like the book that a lot of these other books kind of rotate around in a way. And I don't know if Beast World is going to do that.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting thing where it's like some of the architectural things are still a little weird with DC, especially with the Night Terrors coming off of Dawn of DC like so quickly. But I will say it's just like, there's a lot of books I just really like. Like I love Chip and Jorge Jimenez and everybody else on Batman. Like I think that book is really, really good. That's the most I've liked Batman in a very long time. And it's been really interesting to see what they've been doing on that book and kind of think, I mean, it's not that it's like, I really love Chip and Marco Keketo's Daredevil, but the Batman one, it kind of feels like, in some ways, like a bigger swing.
Absolutely.
And it's very exciting. Like the fail-safe stuff, and then like the alternate universe stuff, and then like the insanity of what was it? Was it Batman 900?
900. It was crazy. It was so fun. And just seeing Jorge Jimenez do all those different styles, it rocked my world.
Yeah, and then like what was it? Was it 136 or whatever? Like the next issue follows 900. Like that issue, like the Bella Ortega issue, and it finishes with this like dining room scene where everybody's making food that feels like a scene out of Wayne Family Adventures.
Mm-hmm.
There's just like this really like I know this is going to change because it's going into Batman Catwoman War or whatever it's called, but there's just like a really good energy to that book. And like that's kind of like generally my vibe with DC right now, where it's like even the books there's a lot of books that I'm not reading where even like the energy seems like pretty pervasive to the point where I want to sample and check them out. That has not been the case with DC in a little while for me.
Yeah, and I haven't even mentioned Dan Mora, who is on two books somehow. He's doing World's Finest and Shazam. They both look freaking incredible.
And they're both with Mark Waid, right?
They're both with Mark Waid, and I mean, it's contemporary Mark Waid, so it's like fine, but like it's not like blowing my mind in any way. But like Shazam has the right kind of cute vibe, and World's Finest is literally just Dan Mora draws everything, and I love it. Like, yes, it's an artist driven book in a way that I feel that way actually about quite a few DC books right now.
Is that your preference?
That it's more artist driven versus
Yeah.
writer driven.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, at this point, I absolutely would. Like, I love like a silent issue, which I know the writers spend a lot of time on because they have to like break stuff down, but that's really an artist spotlight. And I think that the more you can rely on your artist to tell the story, and I mean, that's where the vibe of the book's going to come from. Like the script, yes, but the visual is so much bigger and more important, I feel, because it's the thing that is really hitting you when you turn a page. Your mind needs to take in each one of those words to make those function, but the art, you're taking that all in at once. And so if you have like a Sweeney Boo who is really great at doing this wacky, very kind of Looney Tunesy, but it's like super duper clean in a way that again reads as very like almost like cell animation, gorgeous. And then Dan Mora just doing brilliant super heroics in a kind of like a fusion of like all the best people. It's like Jim Lee and Olivier Coipel, and just like I feel like so many artists that I love are in Dan Mora's. Like it's like they've all fused into him, and he can work like 10 times faster than all of them.
I don't understand how he does multiple books a month. I'm
He's
sure
in,
every what's that?
Well, I wonder if it's like how Brian Hitch essentially like taught himself how to just like cut out 90% of all the extra stuff that I do, and like I can get pages done so much faster without sacrificing all the like too much quality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, I mean, if you go back to Klaus and see his artwork, which he colors on Klaus, so like that book is insanely gorgeous, but he's streamlined so much, really refined. And what that does is give us absolutely gorgeous superhero artwork. And it's so dynamic. His designs are awesome. It's very like I would be happy to have him redesign a billion characters. And I think he did all of like the Superman family redesigns with the little jackets. Like it's so fun. I'm really into it.
I can't not say with certainty that this is a thing, but it is interesting that since Dan DiDio left, that they have, I would say probably amongst the biggest names or like the most exciting artistic names at DC right now are Jorge Jimenez, Dan Mora, Jamal Campbell, and like Bruno Redondo. And obviously some of them were already working at DC to some degree, but it feels like they're really kind of at the forefront and getting put on top books now in a way that they wouldn't have previously. And it has kind of revitalized the energy to the main line in a lot of ways, because it does feel like, I mean, I mentioned Belen Ortega. I actually think Belen Ortega is a very good artist.
Absolutely.
It's really cool to see artists like that getting more of the forefront jobs, as opposed to like before where Jamal Campbell would get like, I don't even know if Jamal Campbell was really getting that. I mean, he did Naomi, but at the same time, he wasn't getting Superman. And then, you know, you had Bruno Redondo was doing like what, like Justice League Dark? No, he did Injustice
for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's been really interesting to see like this kind of elevation of these, and maybe that's just the natural progression of their career. But at the same time, it does feel like the breadth of what DC accepts as art they can have on their books feels a lot broader than it had in the past.
Yeah, and I mean, we haven't even mentioned like Greg Smallwood doing some of the most beautiful artwork on Human Target, a book that I ended up enjoying more than I expected to. I mean, it's so gorgeous. It was so gorgeous. Like it was just like every issue was unbelievably beautiful. Like yes, it had so many of Tom King's ticks, and I feel like eventually, like you just kind of internalize some of these writers' ticks. Like Brian K. Vaughan has a billion of them. Like I mean, Bendis is the ultimate. Um, and like I thought Human Target was gorgeous and pretty fun. And then I think Danger Street is really fucking weird.
I haven't read it, but Jorge Fornes is really good too.
Ornes is awesome. I'm so into the idea of just like all of these rando characters like Creeper, Warlock, Green Team, Manhunter. He was inspired by Into the Woods. And like it has a very Into the Woods vibe. Like the Dr. Fate helmet is the narrator from Into the Woods.
Are you talking about the musical?
Yes. He talked to like CBR about it. He was very inspired by Into the Woods and the way that Into the Woods took all these characters that were like in their own individual worlds and brought them all together into like, and that's like a superhero universe. But having that as the inspiration point gives it a different vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just absolutely gorgeous. And God, there's some, I mean, where is Chris Samney going to come and do like a Superman Black Label book? Like like I know he's doing Firepower and
Right.
Jana's done, so I don't know if he's going to do another creator book. Jana rocked. I mean, kind of superhero adjacent in a weird way, like a commandy type of superhero thing. But that book was awesome, and he's given us covers. But I want to see some Chris Samney interiors. He's probably going to end up on a Batman book.
I mean, I don't know if and when that's going to happen. I imagine at some point it's going to happen, but at the same time, I have no idea how long Firepower is still supposed to run. I have to say, I actually like Firepower. It's still a really solid book, and Chris and Matt Wilson on that book is just like everything you look at is going to look so good, and so it has like a really high floor. But I don't know. I mean, it is kind of interesting. There's like, what is Doc Shaner doing right now? Because he did that Mary Marvel book with Josie Campbell. That book rocked.
Gorgeous. Gorgeous.
I actually think, it's really been amazing to see how much Doc has like continued to improve throughout his career. Like I don't remember what the first project I really read of his was. It might have been that,
Flash Gordon.
Flash Gordon, that's it. Flash Gordon. The Flash Gordon book at Dynamite with Jeff Parker and Jordi Belair.
Yeah.
So good looking. But I mean, his stuff on Mary Marvel, or was it New Champion of Shazam?
Yep.
That looked incredible. And I am very excited to see whatever he comes up with next, because I think like Doc Shaner has like a ceiling that is it's very, very high. Like even in terms of like DC's overall artist repertoire.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just like looking at their books. They have so many good artists on these books. It's like Doom Patrol. You have Burnham doing most of the art, and then the fill-in is David LaFuente. Hell yes. Like, sign me up. It's so good. Well, and they got Javier Rodriguez. They poached him. I was like,
oh, what is he doing?
He did a Superman, a Fleischer-inspired Superman story with Christopher Cantwell in The Brave and the Bold.
Right.
A book that has, I have no interest in a Tom King Joker book, so I don't read that one at all. And then it's Ed Brisson and Jeff Spokes, who I love Jeff Spokes' art, doing... What are they doing? Is it Stormwatch? No, it's a different...
Yeah, I think it's Wildstorm related.
Is it Stormwatch? I think it maybe is Stormwatch.
I think it is Stormwatch.
I don't even know. But then you have Chris Cantwell and Javier Rodriguez just wrapped up their story, which was a 3-parter. And then backups that are like Dan Mora writing. They're Batman Black and White. So it's Batman Black and White backups.
I actually have not read Brave and the Bold just because, God, it's $7.99, man. I was going to read it when it hit DC Universe Infinite. I mean, that is one of the interesting things about this, though. And I think DC is less guilty about this than Marvel is. But a lot of my interest in experimentation is like sideswiped by the fact that some of these books are really expensive. And
absolutely.
It's really tough for me to rationalize spending $7.99 on Batman Brave and the Bold when I know I can wait like 3 months and just read it on DC Universe Infinite, and it's not like quote unquote continuity important and things like that. It's not, there's no sense of urgency to it. It's just cool stories. I'm fine just waiting. And
Yeah.
I don't know, it is kind of a bummer though, because there's like a bunch of books that it's interesting to see where my line lies with these books, where it's like I am willing to spend $9.99 on Gods whenever it comes out, because that's how much it is. Because I love Jonathan Hickman and I'm a total mark, and also because Valerio Schiti is unbelievable. But at the same time, it's like, do I wish it wasn't $9.99? Yep.
I mean, I'm sure it's going to be I bet it's going to be a huge first issue. Like if
it's triple sized.
Like,
I think it's 62 pages.
okay, so it's essentially 2 comics. It's a lot, but whatever. I mean, I spent a lot of money on comics this week. Like I bought the new Jay Stevens book at Oni, and that's a $10 book.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting more price sensitive as I age or something. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just because I'm going to New York for New York Comic Con. Maybe it's because I'm like, I saw my bank account depreciate or decrease so fast because I had to book a hotel there and everything like that.
Oof.
But it is interesting though, because so we're talking about all this stuff with DC, and we're talking about all these individually good books, and we're talking about all these great artists and everything like that. Does it feel like Dawn of DC, even though it got cut short, but it has, the idea of this, does it feel like there's some level of cohesion there, or does it not really matter to you? It just, there's good books where they're good books and you just enjoy it as you enjoy it?
Yeah, kind of a mix of both. I think cohesion is a little less of a priority than it was like in Rebirth. And I think that like, I don't even know what the status of their stupid multiverse is. I think there's Infinite Earths again, maybe. Which whatever. But it's just like, okay, if everything is just like separate or whatever, I don't mind that. I'd rather these books have their own identities, and like they really trust creators to tell stories the way that they want to tell them. I'd rather have that than asking them all to, fit into some sort of bigger narrative or house style or whatever. Like I'd rather just get good books by creators that are willing to take chances.
I have to say, so this is just a jump to the other side really quick. We before we started recording, we were talking about Jed MacKay and we were talking about this Doctor Strange run. I have to say, that book is very good at working continuity, like working shared universe into it. The third issue has this random, well, not really random, a plot-centric reason to have Jean Grey show up with some Mysterium. And it works really well. Like all of a sudden there's like this Krakoa connection because they're right by a gate and she's there with some Mysterium to help him with Dormammu. And you're like, this totally works. And then there's another issue where, I think it's the second issue, where Moon Knight shows up to help with like a case. Mm-hmm. And like that's something Jed MacKay is writing. And all of a sudden it connects really well. And it's interesting how that type of thing is kind of part of the secret sauce of Big Two storytelling, where there has this shared universe and everything. And MacKay doing that on Doctor Strange in a lot of ways feels super unique right now because it doesn't happen very often. But I'm with you. There's like a bit of a tension there because it's like you want these books to stand alone so anybody can enjoy them. But you also want nods in those directions to make it feel more cohesive. And I feel like right now, to some degree, both publishers, particularly Marvel, don't really have a good grasp on where that line lies. And I think DC is more successful with it because the books are more successful across the board. But I don't know. How do you feel about that? Like, do you feel like, I guess, like, how do you feel about how Marvel's handling that side? Is it just a mess?
I mean, it's always been easier at Marvel because the Marvel universe is built on the idea that like Spider-Man shows up in a Daredevil book, and like what the Thing does in Fantastic Four is going to impact the She-Hulk thing or whatever. Like, it's just something that I feel like Jed MacKay he has the vibe of somebody who just like loves continuity. I don't know what his background is and like how long he's been reading comics, but he loves to just like really mine what Marvel Comics history has done. And I feel like Doctor Strange is kind of the best use of that.
Obviously, Al Ewing and Jed MacKay are wildly different writers. I think Jed MacKay has more of a kind of, I compared his Avengers book to kind of more of like a Kurt Busiek and George Perez type feel. but with like kind of like the new characters having like some of those Hickman vibes. So it's kind of like got this old school, new school type thing. But he is very good at using continuity. Al Ewing is as well, but they use it way differently. But I do think it's interesting. I think in a lot of ways his Doctor Strange book, imperfect comparison, I do not mean it's the same qualitatively, and I don't mean it's the same in actuality. But I think that it does have some like the hallmarks of Immortal Hulk in some ways, in that it's taking this character and trying to refocus him and all these different sides of them into like one idea and help us better understand him through that like exploration. And I don't know, it's way more fun book. I mean, like Immortal Hulk is crazy, but
Yeah.
it's just interesting to think about how differently you can use continuity, because Al Ewing is like the master at it.
Yeah, I feel like Al Ewing is more interested in kind of like almost like the like spiritual mathematics of
Oh yeah, look at Defenders.
continuity and like the creative harmonics of like this shared universe that has been created by a billion people and that came out of largely Jack Kirby's mind. Like,
Yeah,
I think he's so much more focused on like the form, I feel. And I mean, we'll talk more about this because I love me some Al Ewing, and Immortal Thor I think is going to rock all of our worlds. So
we'll talk about it now. I'm like, I haven't read Immortal Thor.
Are we jumping over to Marvel?
Let's jump over to Marvel. Let's jump over to Marvel. So we're both at the same spot. We both think that Marvel has some work to do. They have this nostalgia overdrive going on in which they have a lot of books that are like in other timelines and eras and stuff like that at the same time. Like the thing that really gets me is just how many of them are happening that are X-Men based, that are nostalgia books that are happening at the same time as Fall of X, when there's like a billion new books. It's like, it strikes me as a very confusing thing to do, but there's the MCU influence, like the upcoming Thunderbolts book, it might be good, but it feels so forced because of that team. And it's such a bummer. They're just in a really weird spot where there are really good books and there are highlights, but it just feels like everything is separated in a way that Marvel shouldn't be. I don't know. So what makes Al Ewing exempt from that in your mind?
I mean, not even he's fully exempt either, though. But I mean, I feel like he's always been working on in his own kind of world. It's like Al Ewing's Marvel. He worked on those like 5 years of Avengers books that tied into every single thing possible, but like we're setting the foundation for plot lines that have now Roberto da Costa. He's been writing for like a decade now, and he's like the Sunspot writer essentially. It's so sad that Defenders, there was supposed to be a third volume, and Marvel didn't like greenlight it.
Oh no!
Like they had a third part of it.
I had no idea.
Yeah, there was supposed to be like the big finale part, and I think it was potentially because they had different plans for the Beyonder, which ended up being Avengers Beyond or whatever the hell that book is. That's like a Greg Land book.
Wait,
I think that's
really?
It's the sequel to All Out Avengers. I think that's what Derek Landy maybe. I don't even know who's writing it. No, or Derek Landy maybe, or Ethan Sachs. It's one of the guys who writes Star Wars books.
Oh my God. I have to say, I just don't really feel like that's good enough reason to like nuke an Al Ewing book.
I'm not positive if that's exactly it, but like I had seen maybe on Twitter something that they had a third one that they wanted to do, and Marvel was like, nah. And I was like, what? Those were the craziest, coolest books that you were putting out. Like, just let Javier Rodriguez do what he wants to do.
I agree with that.
Or you're going to lose him.
I think they should always let Javier Rodriguez do what they want to do. But I do think it's interesting having Al do an Immortal Thor book and like keeping up that immortal idea as like a kind of brand. And I like that no matter what he's doing, he's given the space to take big swings. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Like I thought the Fury one shot was not my favorite, for example. But like I really loved his space stuff, like the Guardians and Sword going on simultaneously, those two crossing over and then continuing with X-Men Red and everything. I really loved everything he was doing there. Like what he was doing with Star-Lord in particular was really fantastic. But Immortal Thor, though, I love the idea of him getting this big long run to do something really big with the character in a time where there's just not a lot of longevity in runs. And I actually think that that's a big part of what's missing right now is I'm not saying that ongoings are always good or always right, but they do have this extreme proliferation of minis, and it does make a lot of their books feel kind of forgettable and like disposable because it's not really done with intent. It's just done with kind of like a volume approach to some degree. I don't know how you feel about that.
I very much agree. Like they're like most recent solicitations. I was just like, who's reading these? I mean, Marvel's next, like the rest of the year is gonna be so weird. JMS on Captain America. Like that's such a like,
I love Jesus Saiz. Oh,
yeah. I'm gonna check out the first issue of it probably, and then I don't know. Like I haven't read any recent JMS stuff. I did not read his AWA book called Telepaths that had Steve Epting art.
What? This is literally the first I've heard of this.
Steve Epting did a book called Telepaths with J. Michael Straczynski.
I don't understand like how these things happen. How do I not know that this exists? I love Steve Epting. Like Steve Epting's why isn't he drawing books right now for bigger publishers? I don't know, maybe AWA's got way more money than I realized, but I mean, so Immortal Thor, does it feel like it's kicking off something big?
Yes, it is very, very much in the vein of Immortal Hulk, full on callbacks to Immortal Hulk, not narratively, but like structurally in the first issue. Big swings, really gorgeous art. Martin Coccolo, I believe, is how you pronounce his name. But it looks really nice. Matt Wilson, I believe, is still on colors. And they're gonna do some really interesting stuff with mythology, I think. Not at all surprising, considering that like Defenders, Loki, Agent of Asgard, like those are books about storytelling essentially. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's going to follow a similar kind of structure as Immortal Hulk too, where these first few issues might be a little bit more self-contained. Not positive because there's definitely like a cliffhanger in the first issue, but I'm wondering if these are going to be a little bit more like tighter individual stories that will probably have cool structural things to them just because that's what Al Ewing does. And I think he's working with a great artist that I think it's going to be really cool. And I'm very curious about like a horror driven Thor book as well. Like that doesn't necessarily.
Oh, is that the vibe?
I think so. I think that's why they named it Immortal Thor. Like I think it's trying to go for some of those more horror-y vibes while also kind of the way that Immortal Hulk went back to basics and really went to like the Steve Ditko stuff. I'm very curious how I bet it will. Or Immortal Thor is going to mine that early Jack Kirby Thor stuff.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Do you wish that buying and reading digital comics was even easier? Well, I have good news. Omnibus is here for you. Omnibus is a modern digital comic book store and reader app carrying your favorite single issues, volumes, and omnibuses all day and date. They're pay per book, just like your LCS, but digital, so you're already used to the experience. Their focus is on building an excellent customer shopping and reading experience and using novel discovery features to help fans find their next new favorite book. They feature top-tier content and already have many of the top publishers in comics today on board. Want to find the right digital comic shop for you? Download Omnibus today on the Apple App Store to do just that. And now, back to the show. I think that's something that they really need, and they may do this really well, and I'm not sure. We haven't seen it yet, but like Immortal Hulk really succeeded, at least in part, because they had a very thoughtful approach to how they would handle the art, where like Joe Bennett was on, but then they would have fill-ins that like not, but they were strategic fill-ins. They were like, what was my favorite issue? One of my favorite issues from the run was like that. It was in the 20s. I think it was 21. It was like the leader issue that I think Ryan Bodenheim did the art for. And
Mm.
that was a really, really good issue. But it was like whenever they did a story, it was like Al knew it was going to have a fill-in. So he wrote it as like some sort of story that can kind of take part in the overall story without losing the main thread from like Joe Bennett stuff. And so it was really smart in how they approached it. And I think, bringing back Doctor Strange, I think Doctor Strange does that really well with it, where they've had Pasquale Ferry, but then they've had like when there's the story about the war, what was it, the War Wolf of Ashanti or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
the War Strange. They had another artist step in, or they had Andy McDonald step in for issue 4 for the Wong centric issue with the Wand stuff, and using fill-ins as a way to touch on other parts of the story or like fill in details from the past and everything like that, and then letting Pasquale Ferry or Joe Bennett or whoever like take hold of the main story. I think that helps a lot. So if they find a way to do that where Kokolo gets to stick around for like the main beats and then having fill-in artists who do kind of interstitial stories, I think that I really hope they do that, because that was a real secret sauce part of Immortal Hulk's success for me.
I think that is fully the plan. I'm not positive, but just kind of, I really do think that they are taking a lot of cues from Immortal Hulk, and that's one of the smartest.
Good.
And when they would have those issues that have like 4 fill-in artists, and they always figured out a way to make it work. Like, it always made sense.
There was a Immortal Hulk issue. I think it took place from like 4 different perspectives, and they had 4 different artists for it. That was
like
a
the
really
fourth,
good issue.
I think that was issue 4.
I think it was,
or maybe it could have been actually issue 3, because I think it was 1, 2. The third issue was a different artist. 4, 5.
Yeah, they were just always really smart about that. But speaking of long-running things, I have to bring up the X-Men. We're on. God, are we entering year 5 of Krakoa or year 4?
4. I believe we are like at the beginning of year 4, at the end of year 4.
Whatever. We've been around for a bit, and so the fall of X is here. The Hellfire Gala changed a whole lot. When I was doing my Marvel piece, you sent me a big answer as to your thoughts on Marvel. And when I emailed you back and I asked, do you have any other changes to your thoughts because the Hellfire Gala, you responded with nope. I'm curious as to how you're feeling about the X-Men line right now, because the X-Men line is always polarizing, but I kind of feel like there's this real like 50-50, I'm over Krakoa, or I'm like, well, I want Krakoa to stick around. Where do you stand?
I think that the vibe I kind of got is that almost like the creators are done with Krakoa. Like that it just, and the seeds of its destruction have been there the whole time, essentially. Like, these are plot lines that have been running for a long time. Like the like tainted drugs. I think that was introduced maybe like 2 years ago. And I'm trying to think about some other plot threads, but like
Nimrod and like what I'm forgetting her name. Omega Sentinel.
Yeah, and then oh god, I just thought it. Like Colossus.
Oh yeah.
They're just like, when the hell are we going to wrap up this extremely depressing Colossus story where he's just like a meat puppet? Like, that everybody's like, Colossus is so nice, he's so good, and it's like he's trapped in his mind for 4 years.
God.
Did you hear the news today about Wolverine and Sabretooth?
Oh yeah, I did. 9 issues over like 4 months or something like that.
It's actually 10 issues, I believe.
Oh, it's 10 issues. Okay.
But I thought Victor Laval's Sabretooth stuff was awesome. Did you read it?
I did not. No.
Oh, go read it. It's cool as hell. It's really, really, really cool. I like Leonard Kirk as well, and like, that book was an ensemble book where like the first series is Sabretooth, but he introduces the characters that will eventually be the Exiles. And it's a really rando assortment of characters and a smart, very, very smart story, kind of about imprisonment and politics, how you rule. Yeah, it was just cool stuff. And weird, so much weirder than you would have expected. Like, kind of psychedelic, brain melty weird.
I will have to check it out. I've heard good things. When I saw the Sabretooth War thing, though, it was just like, I've had this kind of pervasive feeling of just being tired of a lot of Marvel stuff of late. And when I saw it was like 10, it was 41 through 50. When I saw that and I saw it was Sabretooth and Wolverine again, I was just like, ugh. I'm like, they're just saying it's like Wolverine's greatest foe. I'm like, didn't they just tell us Solemn was Wolverine's greatest foe? I'm skeptical of this. No one believed that Solemn was Wolverine's greatest foe. Although apparently Al Ewing likes the character a lot and will be part of X-Men Red going forward, which I find to be really fascinating. But I don't know. I mean, the interesting thing about the fall of X for me in the X-Men line is I was really just reading Immortal X-Men, X-Men Red, and the adjectiveless X-Men book at that point. Like going into Hellfire Gala, I was just kind of like, there's only so many books I can keep reading in perpetuity. And so the funny thing about the Colossus stuff is like I had absolutely no idea what was going on. I was just like,
yeah.
They brought him in. It's like this big reveal. I'm like, why is he a bad choice to join the Quiet Council? I'm like, he seems perfectly fine. I'm like, something's wrong with Colossus. But it's interesting though, because the Hellfire Gala was also polarizing. I actually really liked the Hellfire Gala, and I actually thought that it did a really good job of giving the line direction, even if that direction is to the end of Krakoa. One way or another, I feel like it needs direction, and I feel like this new status quo is more interesting than kind of like the, I don't know, like solid books existing, but just kind of floating along as the status quo because it is the status quo. It feels like it's giving it a path to either finality or something new to take the line in. And I think that's a good thing. I don't know. What did you think of the Hellfire Gala?
I liked it. I mean, we'll get into the Ms. Marvel of it all.
Please weave it in if you want, because it's a big part of it.
It's a bummer. I find it all a real bummer. Like, I really like Amazing Spider-Man too. So that whole storyline in Amazing Spider-Man was not my favorite. Just like, I thought Dark Web was so silly and fun, and then I was like, ooh, they're bringing back the like Chris Bachalo Aztec god character, and like that seemed like it was gonna be fun because I enjoyed those issues in Brand New Day, and like they're kind of insane manic energy. But then it was like, you're gonna kill Ms. Marvel, and then it was like such a fridgy storyline because then they also like got rid of Mary Jane's kids too, that they essentially Scarlet Witched her, and they were like, your kids are gone, bye.
Wait,
like,
what?
Yeah, now Mary Jane has no more kids. They like disappeared back to whatever dimension they came from, or maybe they weren't real. I don't even know.
So they were magic kids? I have not been reading Amazing Spider-Man, so I mostly just catch the periphery of people being very mad about it all the time.
Yeah, people are so mad about it, and I think it's a really fun book. Like, I love John Romita Jr. I love Ed McGuinness, who does like most of the fill-ins on that book. But like some of these recent decisions, just like Mary Jane's a superhero now. She's now Jackpot. Like she had gotten married and
To Paul,
yes, and in like another dimension or something, and they had kids, but they weren't like their kids. They were kids that they like found in this dimension and adopted essentially. And then the kids got like disappeared at the end of the storyline. And now they're like sad. They're like sad parents with no kids. And Mary Jane's going to become a superhero to like cope with it. She's the Jackpot because she has powers that come out of like some technology that's on her wrist, that it's like a slot machine wheel. It's pretty dumb. Like, I'm like, maybe they'll make it work. Maybe John Romita Jr. will make it fun. And like, I read the last issue was really large because it was like a 925, and like I enjoyed the main story in that. Like, but it is also just like gang war again, and I mean, DC is dealing like another war in Gotham, guys. Really, like it's every single year is the biggest war in Gotham, and like we need to do a story that is Batman solving like Agatha Christie crimes or something. That's like not this world-ending event all times. Because even like I really like Detective Comics.
I like Detective Comics too.
That's another thing that like, and that's like built into that because it's supposed to be operatic and like so big that it's like But it's also just like, here's a new Arkham Tower. I'm pretty sure that already got blown up or something. Like, I'm not positive because Night Terrors has like made me forget. But I'm pretty sure they were like, here's a new tower. Here it is blown up again. I was like, how many times do we see this over and over? But it's like we're reading superhero comics, like the most kind of cyclical,
Yeah.
repetitive genre of. So like when we get new stuff, it's very exciting.
Yeah.
Like so then the way that they dealt with the Ms. Marvel thing, it got leaked. I get that, but then like having it be a news story and it's like this big tragic death. We all know she's coming back, and I don't I don't think making her a member of the X-Men is like a way to make her more interesting. I think it actually kind of takes away from her. She seems like one part of this like big huge franchise now, instead of like the Captain Marvel franchise was not huge. Like she had felt like she had more of her own type of identity. And I don't like Fall of X as a Kamala Khan status quo. I think it's great for the X-Men, but like that's not really why I want to read her books. Like I loved G. Willow Wilson's series, and that's kind of the ideal for me. And that was a teen drama book, essentially. It was built largely around her identity. And I mean, I guess that's what it's going to be now, but it's like, I don't really care about her inhuman and mutant identities and how those are going to like combat. What I cared about was her being a superhero and dealing with her family stuff. And I think that like Emma Frost wiped everyone's memory as well now. So like they don't even know she died. And I think that her mom doesn't even know that she's Ms. Marvel anymore. And I was like, that was like really important. That was a good character beat that she does have. Her mom has known for a long time, and like they can connect over that. So yeah, and then it's just a bummer. I don't know. I'm really bummed about what's going on with Ms. Marvel, and the way that they executed it was just so bad. Like she couldn't even have her own title. Couldn't
Yeah.
have a miniseries. She was a supporting character in Amazing Spider-Man, brought in just to die, essentially.
I do think that I don't know. The thing about Ms. Marvel is like I think about Ms. Marvel and I think of like Adrian Alphona, and I think
Yeah,
of just
yeah,
like I think of small. I think of like small. Like I mean small in a good way. There's a lot of like
yeah.
interiority to the stories, and it's like it feels very personal in a way that like big superhero stories often don't. And going this route definitely puts that into conflict. I will say that I mean I don't think it's a real reach to say that this does not feel. I mean, I know that Zeb Wells has said publicly that it was like his idea, basically, but it also feels like something that Marvel wanted.
Yeah, it sounds like they were like, come up with your idea to make this happen. And he
Right.
did. But yeah.
My take, though, is, and you may disagree with this, I think that for having been put into a tough position where you have to incorporate this character into this giant storyline, I actually think that they're having some fun with Ms. Marvel. Like I thought she was interesting in the Hellfire Gala. I thought like I like the idea of Rasputin the Fourth knowing her. Like that has like some sort of like insinuation that she has like this big destiny coming for the X-Men and everything like that.
Yeah.
And then I also like the stuff where she's kind of underground with them in I think it was the X-Men.
X-Men with Shadowcat. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that they're making lemonade out of lemons there. And that's all they can do at this point. Ultimately, though, I think like I said, the Hellfire Gala, I feel like gave the line a pretty good direction going forward. You know, as a person who's been reading a lot of it, would it be your preference for this to be the end of Krakoa if that's, what's coming?
I don't know. I was pretty gung ho about Krakoa being a long-term status quo for the X-Men.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't know if it's going to go away completely. But I wonder if maybe like Krakoa is going to go away and they're going to keep like Araco or like something like that. And they'll keep like one aspect of this era, but get rid of kind of the main defining element of it. Because I feel like Krakoa can't like really be around. I wonder if it's just going to end with like Krakoa dying, because it's like a living thing. So like I feel like that's probably where we're going. But I think we're gonna get some crazy Doug stuff.
Oh god, that beat in Immortal X-Men when he got swallowed up was
Yeah,
like a gut punch. That was such a good beat.
I think we're gonna get really good Doug stuff. We're gonna get some killer Exodus stuff. Like, what's going on there? I love that he was like, Exodus, Bible, desert, let's go. And who's Exodus with? Exodus is with
Hope.
Destiny, maybe? Oh, and I think Destiny, though, as well,
Yeah,
maybe. I
yeah,
think like the
Destiny,
three of them are together.
because she's wondering what's up with Mystique because he said
Yeah,
that.
Mystique ain't dead. She jumped off that cliff or whatever, but I'm sure she's not dead. Very curious, like, what's going to happen with her. Again, Dark X-Men has a really wacky lineup, and I liked that first issue quite a bit. I liked Jerry Duggan's Uncanny Avengers, so I'm kind of happy to have the Unity Squad back.
I haven't read it yet. It looked pretty good.
Like, I like Javier Garron too. I mean, Jason Aaron's Avengers is finally done. So that book ran for what, 6 years or whatever, and I dropped that 2 years into it. Maybe I did not make it very far. So
I've come to realize I have no sense as to how long runs are. Like, if you told me that, I mean, obviously I was wrong with Krakoa to start with, but if it was 6 years, I would believe you. But also, it somehow felt longer for Jason Aaron's Avengers. I do have to ask. Okay, so obviously the big news involving the X-Men, besides Fall of X, is the fact that Tom Brevoort's taken over X-Men editorial afterwards. Like Kieran Gillen wrote today in his newsletter that it's not impacting current plans by any means. So how do you take that news? Like, is that a positive to you? Like, how do you view that from a reader Marvel perspective?
Literally the first I'm hearing of this. So
really?
I didn't even know. Yeah. When was this announced? San Diego?
It wasn't announced precisely. Well, it was announced by Tom Brevoort in his newsletter. So Tom Brevoort was he said that Dan Buckley brought really exciting news to him, or an idea to him, and he got really jazzed, blah, blah, blah. And then everyone was hypothesizing, and then he made a post on Facebook saying that he was going to be the head of X, basically, and that he would be taking over after all of this kind of storyline gets all sorted out and everything. And so Tom Brevoort will be moving over to be the head of X.
Ah, interesting.
That's quite the reveal on you.
What does Brevoort currently even edit? I'm sorry. I feel like I haven't paid enough attention to editors recently.
He is the Avengers head editor. Like, so he's the executive editor. So he does Avengers and Fantastic Four and an array of other books. I mean, some of the books that I would normally associate with him, I actually thought Ultimate Invasion was him until I looked and I saw it was Will Moss.
Mm.
So I think it's mostly like Avengers and Fantastic Four and assorted others, but I don't know what those assorted others are.
I mean, that could be interesting. I am not caught up on the new Avengers book. I feel like Fantastic Four is in a that's a weird little book.
I like it.
I like it too. I think it's uneven, and I think that Reed Richards is like deeply stupid in it. Like for being smart, like I know that he's going for kind of like he's like socially awkward, but I'm like kind of the whole inciting incident in the book. I was like, he's like a super duper idiot. It feels like the whole like reason why all the kids are gone and stuff. I was like, seems like Reed was really, really, really dumb in that moment. But like a book that takes fun like structural risks. I think that like the idea of it being like a Twilight Zone with the Fantastic Four has been like a smart angle, and yeah, it's fun. It feels like it's its own little world though, and the fact that like none of the kids are there, it does feel like a book that exists in the past of the Fantastic Four, even though it is like their current series.
I really like it. I like that a lot of them are one and done stories.
Mm-hmm.
Besides the one involving like the weird volcano monster that mind controlled people or whatever for like 2 issues. But I really like the most recent one. My big issue with it is that the art does not feel like it matches what Ryan North's intent is. Like if Tom Riley was on that book would be just hot fire.
Absolutely.
Because it has like kind of a modern past type vibe. It's like it's Marvel walking that line that it wants to walk really well in a way that a lot of it doesn't. But instead, it's, you know, there's some really talented artists on there, but at the same time, it just doesn't totally, there's like some friction between those two sides of it. But it is interesting though, because like I think that Tom Brevoort's kind of underrated in terms of editorial, and I think a lot of people think that like he means that Krakoa is gone. I don't think that necessarily means anything. I don't think we know what it means. But I will say this: Tom Brevoort's history as an editor and the Avengers line definitely showcases a person who is willing to take risks and willing to do stories that are outside like the typical expectations. I mean, he was doing the line when it was, Civil War, Secret Invasion, Siege, all those other events that were going on during that stretch, like that 7-year stretch where Bendis was there. And that was, I mean, starting with Avengers Disassembled, that was like a really real, like that was a time where they were making people mad all the time.
Yeah.
And Brevoort doesn't strike me as the type of person who's not going to be willing to take risks, whatever that means. And I don't think that's a bad thing for the X-Men line.
Yeah, I have no idea where it's going to go. Because It's like, who's going to do, what is this, All New X-Men is the book that they're going to announce in New York, I think. And I'm sure that's like the big first book from the line. And
maybe.
I have no idea who's going to be. Like, I feel like
Brevoort says in his newsletter that all things changed on August 1st, 15 days ago. I think that All New X-Men thing was announced before that.
But it wasn't announced yet. It was teased. It was like...
Yeah, but Brevoort wasn't working on the line. Like, he wasn't in that position yet.
But then I don't know.
I don't either. I mean, I think this kind of all goes back to the central point of Marvel, where it's just like everything feels messy.
Yeah. And like Fall of X is messy in like a way that I'm enjoying. And like it that feels like chaos of it all falling apart for them. And I don't know. It's working for me more than I expected. And I'm not as heartbroken about the kind of end of Krakoa as I could be. But I also just wonder if that is like a lot of these, like Benjamin Percy's been writing Wolverine and X-Force for 4 years now. Like that's a good long run. It's reaching its end and I feel it. Like I'm looking forward to.
And there's the Sabretooth War thing is going to be 10 issues. So he's not leaving
so
anytime soon.
It's going to run 50 issues. And like, I bet that 50 will be the end of that series.
Sure.
But like we're going to have a big Beast Reckoning coming up. Are you familiar?
I'm aware of the fact that Beast is like basically everyone's least favorite person. And it sounds like it's deservedly so. I've not read X-Force lately.
And is currently like it fully gone rogue and is in like a giant, like skeleton kaiju underwater, and he's like Dark Beast now. But Beast deleted all of his backups, except the backup of his kind of classic Avengers personality because he felt he had no use for it. So that's what they're going to do. They're going to get rid of Beast and they're going to bring him back as like, oh my stars and garters Beast that that people don't hate, and essentially that's what they're going to do, I think. And because that character is not going to have to deal with pretty much everything post House of M that really kind of sends Beast down a weird path, like it'll probably just be the happy Beast that people like. I think that's very funny.
Do you think we're heading towards like, I mean, that's a pretty significant character reset. The X-Men stuff seems like to some degree, when Brevoort takes over, it's going to have some level of reset, especially given the fact that you're going to have to read his newsletter where he talks about how excited he is. It doesn't strike me as the words of somebody who's going to just be like, I'm just going to take over all the books and everything's going to be normal and the same. There's like a lot of things that feel like there's a reset-y type vibe coming up. And that there's, I don't know, I got a retailer to describe it to me as like, it feels like they're buying time. And like, I mean, even something like the Fantastic Four book, like I love that book, but like a series of like one shots over and over is not the type of book you do for an eternity. It's something that you do for a while before it kind of becomes something else. And it's kind of interesting. I don't know, like there's a lot of books I really like. I really like She-Hulk. I think She-Hulk's, especially since Andros Janelle has been on that book, it's really found its footing. I really like, I mentioned Doctor Strange, Daredevil ending. I have not read it yet. Say nothing.
I have not read it either yet. I haven't.
Okay. But I mean, it's interesting where it's like the books, there's a lot of stuff I like, and there are a lot of them are kind of architectural books, but it still feels kind of disconnected. I mean, a perfect example, this is not an architectural book, but the book you wanted to talk about the most is Doctor Strange Falls Sunrise.
Woohoo!
Why?
Yes.
Why was that? Why is that the one for you? Besides
Because it's
Treadmore, it's just Treadmore.
the coolest book that Marvel has put out in probably the new millennium, and maybe of all time, honestly, in terms of like the visuals that we get. I found the story to be kind of insane in a like just myth making and tying it into like the story fit the largeness of the visuals. I mean, talk about like creative vision. Just this is what this it felt like DC Black Label essentially. Treadmore, unbelievable talent, and just came up with really, really, really weird shit. And then Heather Moore, absolutely incredible. The things that just thinking about some of these like backgrounds that are just tiny little squiggles, and there's 1 billion of them, and they're like all perfectly arranged. And then she goes in and she colors every single one a different pastel shade. Like, it's insane. And it's like so thrilling. Every issue took a long time for me to read, like a very long time, because I would get just like lost in these. I would get lost in a single panel, but then you get like a double page spread that is doing kind of the coolest things you've ever seen with action, and the way that he like builds out environments too, and like will incorporate like grids into his environments that then he can just like destroy and have all these really cool effects around everything. I mean, just talk about like magic. Doctor Strange, I really want like magic from that book. And I think that Pascal Ferry gives a very kind of like, there's a retroness there that like in terms of the vibe there, it gives you almost like I don't know if this is going to make sense, but it's like if you could make like an old Hollywood movie with like modern effects, like that's the kind of vibe it has. A classic feel, and Fall Sunrise, not classic, breaking down all the barriers to the future, and like this is what these characters are capable of. This is the kind of storytelling that these books are capable of, and it's like why should I read something that is totally kind of superfluous? And I found there to be really interesting moments of Fall Sunrise too, where it felt like very emotionally raw, and like it felt like Treadmore was working through some shit on that book. Like that there's maybe something creatively that he needed to overcome or unlock. And there's going to be a Treasury edition, I believe. It should be coming out anytime because that book ended months ago. But it was just so damn cool. Like it's like Spider-Verse when you see that, when you're just like, awesome, this is cool. Like things that really feel like they're pushing the medium forward. And this felt like the next, like, I know that Daniel Warren Johnson is a big Treadmore fan. I think they're both like big fans of each other, and like they have similar kind of going to the next level with their action. But like Trad is so intricate, and like the level of detail, but also like Fall Sunrise had him doing a lot of really cool stylistic shifts and going into like Mignola style, like very like sculptural graphic shapes that weren't super duper detailed. And the contrast of it was just absolutely beautiful. I wrote like I think I wrote like 5,000 words on the first issue, and then I'm getting ready to do the second issue because I want to actually like do a deep dive of every issue of the series. And I'm rereading the second one, and I'm halfway through, and it's taking forever because it's just like, oh my god! Like the second issue is when they go into like the human, like the meat machine or something. It's essentially like a giant god that they get eaten, and like I don't know. It's just so weird, so cool, and that's the energy I want. I want like always
big swings.
Big swings. That's what I want.
Yeah. Well, actually, that ties into a patron question I got. Scott Hazelwood asked is there's a kind of superhero or superhero adjacent story you'd like to see that you haven't seen before, or at least haven't seen in a long time? Like, is there basically it's like a type of thing you want to see more of? Does it really just kind of come down to big swings for you, or is there something more specific you think?
Oh, I mean, I need like She-Hulk is scratching it a little bit, but I miss my like Runaways Hangout superhero book. Like those
Squirrel
are
Girl,
always that's Squirrel Girl exactly. Like what did you call them? Did you call them
the Hangout
Hangout
books.
comics?
Yeah, Hangout
Yeah,
comics.
like I miss Runaways a lot, a lot, a lot. Like that book was just I have such a strong attachment to those characters, and that book was so good. Um,
I'm actually kind of shocked by how much I like Jack of Hearts. I never thought that was a character that'd be like, yeah, Jack of Hearts, but Rainbow has really nailed Jack of Hearts.
I mean, like She-Hulk started so slow where I really was like those first 5 issues, I was like, nothing's happened. Like, really nothing has happened. But like Runaways also started pretty slow, not as slow,
You
but
just love the
like
Runaways, though.
it really takes its time. And the thing is, because Rainbow takes her time kind of setting the stage, it just like puts you in the vibe. And that's another thing too. I want like a really strong, clear vibe from what this creative team wants to do, and you don't always get that. And like I think that is the vibe is off a Fantastic Four with the art, like that's affecting it. And I think the coloring's a little too shiny and nice. um God, if Tom Riley and Jordy were on that book, it'd be just like so gorgeous.
You know, it's funny. Already worked on FF related things, but there's a part of me that really wonders what that would be like with Nick Dragata on there.
Oh God, oh my God, oh so good.
His FF stuff was amazing. I do want to say, so my pick for that would actually be, I want like more longer run stories, like an actual ongoing that don't have like big universal importance, but are just good and fun. Like Fantastic Four is in theory something like that, but I think the art doesn't get all the way there for me. I like
Mm-hmm.
an example I thought of was Superior Foes of Spider-Man. We haven't had a book like that in a while.
Yes.
I love Superior Foes of Spider-Man, and it's just Nick Spencer and Steve Lieber just riffing and being super weird. And I feel like that type of stuff is as important to what makes Marvel special as like the architectural stuff. And I don't know. I love that book. And I want more like kind of like weirdo, definitely not going to be a superstar for sales, but might end up like kind of building and building and becoming like a cult classic. That's what I want.
I mean, that was very much a humor book too, which I'm always down for there to be more kind of overt humor books that are not just Deadpool and Harley, essentially. I'm really looking forward to this Fire and Ice book that's coming from
Yeah.
DC. That's like another Marvel talent. They lost Natasha Bustos, who is an incredible artist who has gotten even better after Moon Girl, and like now is at DC. And I think that's going to be a really fun book, and a book where we're taking characters that, I mean, I guess they kind of got the spotlight in Human Target, but this is a completely different vibe. It looks like.
Did you see Greg Smallwood's cover for the second issue?
I think I did actually.
It's really incredible. I mean, that guy's just really good. But yeah, I mean, I like that stuff. I like the humor books, but it's not just like having a humor book. It's like giving it time to like find itself, because just so many books at Marvel in particular feel like so impermanent. They just come and go
Mhm.
before I even know that they exist. I don't remember, like, I was reading something involving, and this is a bad example because it's an ongoing book that's been around for shockingly forever. There's like the Star Wars Bounty Hunters book that's like been around for like
Yeah,
40 issues or something. I'm like,
yeah.
I didn't even know it had one issue out. And like, this is literally my job. So it's very bizarre that like there's just this disconnect between, I don't know, like marketing and like building awareness in this stuff and like somebody like me being aware of it. But at the same time, I would like to have more ongoings that are a little bit more off the beaten path, whether that's humor or something else. But I do want to bring up, before I ask my questions to close, you wanted to specifically bring up Void Rivals, like it's superhero adjacent, as you noted, but also like you mentioned Daniel Warren Johnson earlier, to get connected to Void Rivals. You have a Transformers run coming from him that I think in a lot of ways is actually more exciting than anything Marvel or DC has coming up, and is kind of in that vein of superheroes too. what's your take on that? How are you feeling about that whole Energon Universe business?
Yeah, you couldn't see, but as you mentioned, Transformers, I was doing like making it rain, like knocking money out of my fist because it's just like take all my money. Oh, it's gonna be so good. So the thing with the Energon universe that I'm really enjoying is the general idea of it's going to be this major IP, but we're coming at it from a completely different angle. And I loved that it was a surprise that nobody like people knew that Skybound had the licenses that had kind of become an open secret. But like I don't think people thought when Void Rivals was announced, it was like an exciting new shared universe. I don't think people were like, that's gonna be the Transformers books and G.I. Joe. Like Tom Riley on G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
Hell yes. Like, I mean, he's on
With
Duke,
Josh Williamson
whatever.
again too, I will note. Like it's kind of interesting that they're both working together on two straight books, but yeah.
And like, I have no interest in that, but I thought the first issues of Void Rivals were really cool. I love Lorenzo De Felici, amazing artist. So like, I thought that was cool. And then you have Daniel Warren Johnson on Transformers that is going to, I just think, knock all of our socks off. And I mean, he's done superhero books. I mean, all and a lot of his, but like Murder Falcon is very superhero adjacent. Do a Power Bomb is extremely superhero adjacent. And like Do a Power Bomb, it feels like I was thinking about it recently where I was like, the end of Daredevil, the Chip Zdarsky run, kind of feels like it had a like do a power bomb type of build where it's just like suddenly we are in crazy town. Like,
Suddenly God is involved. Well, I guess it's less surprising with Daredevil, but
but still, I was like, wow, this Daredevil run was weird. Like, it started off as so, I mean, it was all very like Catholic-y, but like really started off as this kind of exploration of guilt and violence, and then it really just steamrolled and became a crazy book. And yeah, that's one where I'm very curious about like what this new run is going to be. I love Aaron Kuder, um, Saladin Ahmed. A little hit or miss for me. Like his later Marvel works, I didn't like as much as Black Bolt, but like very curious about like again haven't read the last issue of Zdarsky's run. Is it just going to be going? I'm worried that it's going to feel like going from Mark Waid to Charles Soule's run, which wasn't a bad run. And like Ron Garney, beautiful artwork, but it's like I loved Wade Sammy's run so much and what they did with that character and the new things they brought to it. And now we've completely backslid, and now we are back at a retro status quo that I don't want to be in because I've seen more interesting stuff, but they needed it to be back to Matt is working in a law firm in New York because Daredevil, the TV show, is coming out. So
I haven't read the finale, as you know. You haven't either. But they're going to have to make a significant change because he's pretty much deceased at the end of the 13th issue. So they're going to have to do a little backsliding.
but they literally killed off multiple characters like 2 issues before, and then they're back. Like Foggy was dead. He's not dead anymore. He just like got let out of hell, and now
I
he's
think
alive.
but he was dead to begin with. It was just like he was uh, basically like I don't know, like a ashen
Fake.
creature created by the hand or whatever. Like,
But he wasn't. But he's not dead because I thought that he went to hell and found him, and like when.
Oh no, yeah, no, he was there, but like in the issue, like when he gets him, he was like, God, what did he say? He like I didn't survive, like I got killed when like somebody went to go attack me or something like that. I think it was like Strong.
Is Foggy still dead then? Interesting.
No. Foggy's now out. He's now naked next to Elektra.
Okay, so he is alive.
He's alive, but I think he'd been dead for a while. He just was like this weird ashen. It's comics, man. It's complicated, but I do think I don't know. That's one of the interesting things though. Is it's just always really interesting to see like who picks up the ball next. Like Daniel Warren Johnson, easy sell. Saladin Ahmed and Aaron Kuder. It's not a slam dunk in the same way that Daniel Warren Johnson taking over Transformers is. Like you know, you could say any book basically for Daniel, and I would be all about it. But all right, to close though, I want to bring up a fantasy editorial idea. I was actually talking to somebody at Marvel recently about the idea of fantasy editorial and how attractive that is. But for both publishers, what's one thing you would want to see more of or less of? What's one thing you would change? It has to be one thing. It can't be like, I want less miniseries and no more Marvel Cinematic Universe tie-ins. Like, what would you do?
Um,
Give Trad
I
more
would
all the money.
say, oh yeah, I mean, but I don't want Trad Moore to do any more superhero stuff. I think that Fall Sunrise was kind of, almost like a swan song of superhero stuff. And now go do whatever you want. Make your own things. Your brain is too good for this. Like, don't go do what Daniel does and go write your own comic and then come back and do a Superman book or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then go and do your own cool thing and rinse and repeat. Or, become a gallery artist or something, probably, because he's just like so insane.
All right. What would you do for Marvel or DC, though?
What would I do? I would say, really, I would love to see them focus on giving each book a very distinct visual identity. That having that be a very top priority, which is hard.
Are you talking about for both Marvel and DC, or just
For both Marvel and DC? I think that Marvel needs it more right now. Like, I feel like there's a lot. The Marvel house style, I feel, is very strong right now, and a lot of like the Stormbreakers kind of fit into like CF Villa and Carlo Gomez and Carlo Lopez. They all kind of have like very similar art styles, I feel. And I would like to see, more variation. I feel like that was like you mentioned, Superior Foes, like that. Marvel Now, weird times, but they really did have very, very clear visual identities for a lot of those books. You had Mike Allred doing FF. You had Erica Henderson on Squirrel Girl. You had these very clear visions. And I think DC is doing that a lot better right now.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think it really helps too, though, that DC has Black Label and really is investing in it, it feels like, and they're getting really amazing talent for it.
Yeah. I think my thing would be, it's going to sound like two, but I really mean it as one. Streamline and focus more on ongoings for Marvel in particular. And then for DC, like when I say that, I mean, like, I think right now they just have so much that nothing like feels really important at Marvel. And I think if they like kind of fine tuned and like gave what was remaining a little bit more longevity, I think that it would start to have a little bit more oomph to it naturally. I mean, because like if you think about it, like something like Immortal Hulk is like Immortal Hulk was like a book that you and I were talking about until like 10 issues in. Then it started reaching critical mass and people started reading it like crazy. And then it became one of their biggest hits. And it's like sometimes a book takes 10 issues to fall apart, but sometimes it takes 10 issues to really succeed. And I think right now Marvel's not giving books the chance to succeed because they're too worried that it's going to be a failure. And I think that that's a bit of a bummer for me as a reader because you can kind of feel that safety in the work. And with DC, I don't really have like a lot of notes for them. I stopped like breaking up your own books for events that after 2 months. Like that's
don't
like
do that again.
Don't do that again. Yeah. I guess that's it. It's just like, let their books be books. If, you bring out the Titans and say that they're the head of the DC universe now, and you got Tom Taylor and Nicola Scott on there, I'm like, let me read that book. It doesn't seem like that should be, I don't know. I guess my recommendation, my fantasy editorial hat is like, everybody should get out of their own way. And I guess Black Label is really good at that, at least. Black Label is just focused on making good books, and they're doing a really good job. Also hired Kyle Starks for everything. That's it.
Well, get ready because his Pet Avengers book is a delight. I also got a chance to read that one. Yeah.
He was on the podcast not long ago and he was talking it up and he was just like, this isn't a Pet Avengers book you read before. And I'm like, I am fairly certain that that will be true because I've read a fair amount of them and they're normally very goofy in a way that Kyle Starks would not normally do.
I mean, it's goofy though. It's still silly, but like it has a really gorgeous artist. Like it looks really, really nice. And I just found it really fun. Like silly. That like the idea of it is so silly. Fundamentally a deeply silly idea. And
it's Pet Avengers. I love it.
But like it felt like they were like, we're gonna put some talent behind this goofy ass idea. And that's fun. I like that. Yes, give me my Kyle Starks. And I think Jesus Herva, I believe, is the artist. An artist I didn't really know much about, but really, really good. God, Peacemaker Tries Hard is so funny. Red Bee, so funny. Oh my God, all the snowflake stuff was amazing in the most recent issue. Have you read the newest one?
I have, yeah. I love Kyle Starks and his ability to like make a book very action packed and really funny, but also have like this heart to it that like kind of makes you sad. God, there's this like sequence in the first issue where Peacemaker gets this dog, Bruce Wayne. I know you know this, but I mean for listeners, and there's like this 4-panel sequence where it's just Bruce Wayne, like he's talking about how like nobody cares about me, and like basically he's at this low point in his life, and like nobody cares if I live or die, basically. And Bruce Wayne comes over and just like circles in his lap and lays down, and it cuts to him like with a tear in his eye, and Steve Pugh just like absolutely murders that moment. And then like the next page is this like flashback with his dad where he's talking about it. He's like, I'd love to get a dog, and his dad's like, you're a piece of shit, I hate you. And you're like, it's just, I don't know. Kyle Starks, he's just really good at what he does, and what he does is write comics. But no more. We can't go. I'm going to start talking about Kyle Starks, and things are going to go in an entirely different podcast. That's all I have for you, Oliver. Thank you so much for joining me for the 100th annual Superhero State of the Union. I don't even know what number we're at. I'm going to say 7. 7 sounds right.
Maybe I was going to say 6. So
either way, I always love doing this with you. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. It's always a delight. And keep reading good comics, everyone.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with comics critic Oliver Sava. You can find him on social media at Oliver Sava and on his Patreon. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel. And when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast, as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site Sketched at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by following on Twitter and Instagram at SketchComic, or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Christina Merkler, Andrew Lehman, Mike Hansel, Scott Place, Darcy Van Polges, Kevin Bides, Travis Schmeiser, Tom Evans, Natalie Mockreek, Reed Beeman, Kelly Sudconic, Max Wood, Jeremy Lambert, Brian, Matteo Ciccati, Chris Doré, Nir Levy, Dennis Hoffman, Jason Hussa, Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Uratam, Henry Johnson, Jingo Boren, James Tynan IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Peachy, Ben Damstead, Rom V, Nick Walker, Patrick Coyle, Isaac Oren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Narb Studios Comics, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Van de Ven, Brian Subman Industries, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masellic, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Canadian by Proxy, Bradley Rader, Carl Choi, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shelby, Dan Garino, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, Nick Bennett, Birdcage Comics Cafe, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Stephen Hall, Philip Myrick, Chris Bachala, Torin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Julia Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Vita Ayala, Akil, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Nick Polito, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxwell, Cliff Chang, Carl McMahon, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Adam Highfield, Fiona Stables, Mark Abnett, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Wolfpack for letting me use their song Outro as the show's opening theme, and to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote performed Off Panel's outro and ad music just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.